thanks for putting me here. And so it was a nice workshop, I think. First of all, because I know now more things than when I come. So that's usually the aim of a workshop, that you learn some valuable information. And so what we came here for, because I was wondering why there were so many people, because 20 or 30 people in biostatistics is huge. So we made some small text, and at the end you can see the objective of this workshop, and I think I understood why. There are lots of people, and also because it was in Bordeaux, because it looks like it's a popular city. I'm often in Bordeaux also. And so if we just see the overall objective of the workshop, we have some very broad presentation about discrimination, accuracy of prediction, and also some take-home message, and we'll just discuss. So I first of all, is it the first workshop on these topics? No. And there were some people already. There's lots of workshop on prognostic research. And in 2004, during an NCI workshop, I went to the publication that is mentioned here, and I just checked if they were mentioning some issue that we are addressing today. And the good news is that some points concerning the fact of incorporating risk factor changes over time into model was one identified point in 2004. And there were, if you read the list of the recommendation of this workshop, we follow the lines of this workshop. We revise existing risk calculator. We have some various topics about how to update your risk calculator. We also have, to encourage the development of new type of risk model. We'll see that Karl Moon is not so okay with that, and we think there is too much risk calculator. And but concerning the validation of the risk model, I think we all learned some proper methods to do that, thanks to, for example, Paul and others. So, for the feedback from the day one, just to pick the main point of Karl Moon's, so he made a point saying that there's a balance between developing and using or updating myriad. Myriad is lots of, for people who don't know these words. And there's lots of risk prediction, and I think there's also some work to update them dynamically. And he also confessed that he made some mistake, which is a good point. And he also, I think, was pedagogic and seems to be a Frank Harrell fan. And since there's also student in the audience and also researcher, I think it's also important that the teacher, the professor, teach proper methods, which is seldom the case in survival analysis and validation of model, which is very rarely taught. So maybe we can put some more of this issue in the students' training. Regarding the aim of the workshop, so we updated dynamically our knowledge, which is good. And what I like in Karl Moon's talk is how to study the impact of using a prediction model on the screening, for example. You can stop me. Now it's a song, but okay. It was for Karel, so I will email him because he is back in this country. there's this paper that you might know, which is the key statistical paper from 85 to 2002, and Francarel is the 10th. It's a paper on variable selection, okay? And you will probably find some people working on the prognosis model here. Professor Starr is not there no more, so he won't get the joke. Okay. But I will also email him the slides. Okay? So he made pretty clear that the R2 is not a measure of fit, and suggested a versatile tool based on rank that can accommodate various settings in survival analysis, which is multi-state model, recurrent, and he also updated his point of view concerning past work that he believed to be wrong. So it's a good also take-home message that we can write some paper and year after realize that we have evolved. Okay, some people stick always to their knowledge at baseline, and usually it's left center. So Thomas recalled a clear roadmap in building, updating, and evaluating risk prediction model using Breyer score. I will download the Breyer paper on the weather channel or something, and insist the fact that dynamic analysis will update the coefficient of the model, and he also introduced, for people not familiar with the landmark methodology, this sequence of time origin, landmark time, and time horizon, which is not so used if you're not into the landmark business. So for the hand footer, he recalled what was the original idea of the landmark, and which was not in a statistical paper, which is also true for the Breyer score. So maybe we should broaden our reading, but we don't really have the time, so we will let smart people told us to read other review. And he exemplified the dynamic prediction within the reversible illness death model in a very pedagogic way. And he also exemplified the dynamic prediction with the landmarking. So I said very nice landmark dataset plot, and also Paul made some. But I think for teaching it can be very misleading because it's not to be confused with the at-risk process. But I think it's very useful once you have understood what is an at-risk process to see how the things are moving. And then he used the supermodel and plugin the co-specific hazard with the same methodology of Cheng-Fine Way, all under the proportional hazard hypothesis. Vincent Poilier discussed the recurrent event problem with potentially intensity that incorporates history of recurrence, and he discussed about the bridge that might exist with between reliability and biostatistics, and I think it's probably in the book of Olen, Morgan, and Jessing, where they discussed dynamic covariates, which is something that incorporates the past of all the, how do you say, usure? In English, not in French. Okay. But even if you're not, if you don't work on reliability, you can have a look at this book. It's not a very simple book, but there are some smart ideas. So maybe in 20 years we'll have some feedback from this paper. The next, Virginie Rondeau, which we can thank for leading this workshop with Cécile also. introduced another species of joint model where the two survival process, I think was recurrence and death, were linked between frailty that are shared between this process. And the motivation was to, instead of using just the count of recurrence as a covariate, for example, also using the distribution of the time of the recurrence. She mentioned also the fact that internal time-dependent covariate is not appropriate for the recurrence, so I think it's also a take-home message that you cannot, you have to make clear what is a time-dependent covariate and states, and that you cannot put states and covariates in Cox model like that. And we also have the very interesting tale of Mr. Martin's breast cancer, and which can happen when you are when you make roll, actually, I think, for men. And she employed also for the error prediction, the Breyer score, Taylor with the sensory. Finally, for the day one, Jeremy Taylor introduced the setting with of competing risk with Q fraction. And you have very interesting, I would say, cluster data, because we have 13 trials. And he relied on parametric hazard inference. And fitting this multi-state model with parametric hazard, you can then compute some meaningful quantity that all are functional of this transition. And here I think I remember it was residual lifetime. And he also made a nice connection with the landmarking. And I mentioned another paper that might be of interest for people working on breast cancer and with Q fraction, which was published in the GRSS-A, which we won't read often, but sometimes some interesting paper. Okay, so day two, which is today, Dimitris, yesterday we said that he was the next Terry Terno because he was sailing and maybe giving his book around the world. Made a crystal clear presentation about the past and current issue on joint modeling. And again, he recalled the internal, external covariates, because the other one is very hard to say. And I'm not sure we saw this reference, but there's a very nice paper of Cortesian Anderson in Geometrical Journal about time-dependent covariates and competing risks. And I've realized that we saw dynamic prediction and very nice dynamic graph, which are very pedagogic. And I think we, also for the paper, for the publication, we might, I don't know how to do that, but for on the web appendix, for example, we can have this kind of graphical, because it's really helps to understand what's going on and what was actually the analysis when you move your landmark, for example, and you see the effects of the prediction. So I'm not editor of a journal, so I might ask some people if how can we put some animation for free in the articles. And he also introduced some refinements of the longitudinal submodel in joint modeling within the linear mixed model, and also compare the impact of these refinements on the dynamic prediction using the BMA machinery. And it was convincing, I think. Next, Cécile Pousse-Lima presents another framework for addressing the joint modeling, notably for linking the submodel. And she provided a fair comparison with the frailty approach. And the main interest was of to estimate the posterior distribution of the dynamic prediction. And notably, she wants to study the impact of the initiation of a new therapy on such probability, which is a very, which will go in the line of what Karen will say about how you assess the intervention on the prediction. Next poll assess the predictive accuracy in the context of the joint modeling with competing events. It derived a formal test of equality of time-dependent AUC with right sensor data and also of the prediction error. Why the landmarking S is varying? And it appears to be a versatile methodology, I think. Next, Donna Polar Ankerst show a nice crash course on real-time clinical epidemiology. And the main issue here was to how to update the risk calculator for prostate cancer, and to see how you can incorporate medical innovation, which is a new biopsy, 6 and 12 core. Okay, it's pretty hard for a man to imagine this kind of exam, and also the use of the SNPs, and also she presents how to do this in an automated manner, and she also tackled the improvement of the AUC with some costly biomarker, and I suggest this reading, which is because all the improvement of the added value of new markers are very hot topics, and it's like a flame war between all the different measures. So there were a recent paper about the NRI and IGI, which but you have to read, for example, the testing for improvement in prediction model of Margaret in Statistics in Medicine. You can find it on the COBRA website for free. Okay, so it's a tough part for me. But the mechanistic model, in short, so the biological knowledge is translated into a set of equations, or a system of ordinal differential equations. Adeline, a short course. You've heard that the question I've asked is that she's using pretty fluently the nonlinear mixed model, so maybe it would be of interest to have such modeling approach for the longitudinal submodel. Lots of work. Then Thierry Collin had a memory issue with these first slides, and he discussed the image-based simulation of tumor growth. And I was wondering if this kind of simulation was maybe a tool for improving, different type of cancer, how to simulate the timing to progression, because we are not so good with clinical data to eventually simulate the timing to progression. So that's maybe a possible link between mechanistic model and clinical trials. Then Mélanie Prague. I have some question here. Is it feasible to use mechanistic model to update a time-dependent longitudinal covariate? We have missing data, for example, and we can use maybe this mechanistic model as a nice way to impute data. But as you see there, in the joint modeling, we don't have lots of measurements. It's not high frequency data, but it might help sometimes. I'm not aware of a situation where it could be used. And I was also wondering if we can, is it feasible with mechanistic models, so to simulate an intervention that would affect the dynamic system, to see what is the impact on the individual. So that might be a nice bridge or something, but sometimes you just say something and so. And few words about the design of the clinical trials. Thomas Filleron provides a tool for planning and monitoring group sequential trials. Of note, this was also extended to combating risks recently by Brian Lowe and Meiji Deng. So it's a group sequential with combating risks. Here, just a reference about how to plan a clinical trial based on joint modeling inference. It's a recent paper of Chen, Ibrahim, and June Statmed. So, I think it's quite close. So the take home, we all have all the dedicated package to do most reasonable situations. So hopefully this leads to faster dissemination, and unfortunately this also leads to misuse. It's just like you give tools and you have to learn the tools. So don't forget that the longitudinal submodel is for an internal time-dependent covariance, and that you cannot just plug this in other survival model, and that you cannot condition on future. And so we are under surveillance. There's a Cochrane progressive method group, which might be also under surveillance, maybe a large group whose surveillance for the Cochrane group. But there is a very nice source of publication and information in this website. And there's also a book coming about the risk assessment and the evaluation of prediction. It's not my book. We've made a paper with Paul and Viviance about time-dependent ADC, so I think also it might be of interest. We don't have any money involved here, so I think I'm done.